The Real Deal is on.
This is The Real Deal. I'm Mike Straka, hanging out with the guy who defined The Real Deal, Joe Eszterhaus, screenwriter, The Devil's Guide to Hollywood. This is your third book?
This is The Devil's Guide to Hollywood. The screenwriter is God.
Right.
It's a very important part of it, considering my feelings about screenwriters. It's actually my fifth book, but it's the third that I've written in the past 6 years.
Right. Now, you have lots of anecdotes from different screenwriters, different directors, producers, basically anybody who's anybody in Hollywood. How in the hell did you get them to agree to let you use their quotes?
Well, first of all, let me back up a little bit. It's a book about screenwriting, and it's meant to give screenwriters a kind of pole to hang on, because screenwriters are always abused in some way, always have been historically. And I wanted to write a book that's about screenwriters and screenwriting, but that's also tells the absolute truth about their situation. It's unlike any screenwriting book that you've read, and it's written by a man who really knows screenplays, because I've been doing it for 30 years and 15 movies. Most screenwriting books, including some well-known ones, are written by guys who don't write screenplays. And I've always wondered, why should anybody read a book about how to write a screenplay from a guy who doesn't actually sell them? Right? So that's where I began, and that's where I came from, in terms of all of the different anecdotes and all the things that are in the book. Many of them are things that I experienced and heard myself. Others come from interviews and detailed sources. Mm-hmm. And the composite picture, hopefully, is a picture of today's Hollywood, done in absolutely honest, gritty terms. The New York Times yesterday called the book brutally honest and uncompromisingly ethical, and I'm flattered with that. I'm very happy with that description.
Well, brutally honest has been something you're quite familiar with. Hollywood Animal, American Rhapsody, both books were described as being brutally honest by some publication or some TV personality. Right. What do your friends in Hollywood think of how brutally honest you can be? This is the third book where I write about Hollywood, and never in all the times that I've gone back, and I go back a lot each year, and have meetings and talk to people, no one has ever objected to anything that I've written. And some people will laugh and say you're a scoundrel, or they'll, as I pass them and they'll go, I read your book. But actually, very many, I got a lot of requests where the books were sent to me and people asked me to sign them, from people who were in the book. Mm-hmm. So, I think that one of the things I try to do is to puncture thin skins. And I seem to do it in a way where you're busting balloons and there's a lot of noise sometimes. But I also think that the books are funny, as is this one, I think. And I think people can bring themselves to laugh about it. Now, you're particularly hard on some of your fellow screenwriters, mostly when they kiss butt. Well, I think that unfortunately there's been a tradition of saying, do it for the money, don't care about it, don't put your heart and gut into it, and it really doesn't matter. I disagree with that. Anything that I write, and I think anything that most screenwriters write, should come from your heart and gut and soul, otherwise it's not going to be very good. If you care about what you've written, and if it does come from your heart, then I don't think you're going to tolerate people changing it or saying, no, you have to do it this way, without at least getting into a gigantic brawl that takes them to the wall. You may not win that brawl, but chances are good that you could back people off if you're willing to fight for what you've written. I think a screenplay as a book is your creative baby. And you have a responsibility to fight for it, as you would for your children. And those who advocate not doing that, I think, are betraying what a writer is all about. A lot of the times you just mentioned write what you know, and you have a lot of examples of how you wrote what you know. One of those things being cigarettes. Yes. You wrote a lot about cigarettes, yes. And you feel like you glamorized smoking in movies, particularly Basic Instinct. I did. I've done in many of my movies. The people smoke, and young people smoke. And I'll be very honest. I wrote those scenes in those films because I was tired of a certain kind of political correctness that was encroaching on smokers. Then I got throat cancer. And in the course of a brutal recovery from a very complicated surgery, I met other people who had throat cancer. One of the people I met was a 17-year-old boy who had throat cancer. Never smoked a cigarette in his life, but his mother was a chain smoker, and he had been around her all of his life. There's no doubt in my mind that that secondhand smoke is what gave him throat cancer. That young man continues to fight for his life. So after I went through what I went through and I learned what I learned, I said to myself, I will try, to my dying breath, to give something back and fight against smoking in films. And I've done that in a myriad of ways, by writing articles, by working behind the scenes, particularly by singling out young actors who smoke on screen, who I think give a terrible example to young people. There's a memo from a tobacco company executive who said, there is no more powerful ad for smoking than a cigarette in the hands of a star.
Point taken. One of the funny stories that you mentioned, and there are a lot in this book, I really got a kick out of the guy who went to L.A., stayed at the Beverly Hilton Hotel, or the Beverly Wilshire, wherever it was.
Four Seasons, right.
And he was basically taking meetings to try to be a writer, and you told him, why don't you go back to Chicago and write?
Yeah, he was, there's a philosophy that says if you can schmooze your way to the top. Well, not in screenwriting, because all they really look at is what comes out, what the pages and what the characters say. And I said to this person, don't do this. Sit down and write. All the energy that you put into schmoozing and networking, put all that energy into writing, into the actual writing itself. Sit on your butt and do what you're supposed to do, which is write. And that's your best shot to do it.
Dalton Trumbo, Robert Towne, William Goldman, Joe Eszterhaus. These are some powerful names that you have in your book. What are the readers going to learn from all of the examples you put in from some of the greatest screenwriters?
Well, one of the things that's happening today, Mike, I think, is that everybody wants to be a screenwriter. They don't want to write the great American novel anymore. They want to write the script that sells for $3 million. On the way to the studio coming down West 53rd Street, I saw a table filled with scripts for sale. There's obviously a market for that, a big market if they're selling it on the streets. I think what they'll learn here, this is a good survival guide, a kind of war manual, if you're going to do this, of how to stay alive. Using all the tricks and things that I've learned in 30 years, when to fight, when not to fight, when to back off, and also writing tricks like, if you have a movie made, steal as much memorabilia from the set as you can, because the actors will do it if you don't. Right. So you may as well get some of the goodies instead of the actors, only the actors.
And your cure for writer's block, go back and retype the entire script from page one.
Yeah.
Or break your toe.
Or break your toe. It's worked for me sometimes, more often. I get stuck on page 40 and I go right back to the beginning and start the whole thing over again. And somewhere on page 30 or 20 or something, I will find where I've gone wrong. And it frees me up. Breaking my toe, I have a gigantic rock on my desk that says writer's block that I did drop on my foot once, and that caused a serious writer's block for several weeks.
Well, the book is called The Devil's Guide to Hollywood, Joe Eszterhaus, the screenwriter as God, and this is in bookstores now.
It is.
And, first of all, that's a great title.
Thank you.
Appropriate, I should say.
The title came from when I was a boy, I admired Ambrose Bierce's writing. He's a contemporary of Mark Twain's, and he wrote a book called The Devil's Dictionary, which is very funny and very sort of dark and mordant. And the screenwriter is God. After generations of screenwriters who've been abused, misused, I sort of wanted to extend the middle finger and say, the screenwriter is God. Right? It's a joke.
It's what I like about you, Joe. You're so humble.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming in. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
The Real Deal is on.